Hi, Bart. Firstly, thanks for coming on. I appreciate you have a busy schedule, so cheers for taking the time.
My
Really means
pleasure.
a lot to me.
No, thanks for
So,
having me. Pleasure.
so just for anyone that doesn't know that's watching this, Bart was a senior academic lecturer. He's also got an expertise in physiology, exercise, nutrition, and statistics. He has a large YouTube following, which I'll remember to link below. I just wanted to get a backstory on you, Bart. So, in your experiences, what do you think is most critical for high performing athletes, elite athletes, people that train, maybe go about your background in the New Zealand All Blacks team. What can you say about
Right. It fits in really quite well, Jonathan, because the most crucial thing for any elite athlete, I think, in terms of training standalone, is specificity. As you train, so shall you perform. If you want to train to run fast, then your training should be running fast. This idea that you should do a whole bunch of volume at a speed of running much slower than the competitive speed, false. You should do no such thing. If you are a rugby player, what is required physiologically for you to be a good rugby player? Well, that was a question that the New Zealand Rugby Union thought they had an answer to, until a group of researchers I was involved with suggested to them perhaps maybe what they thought wasn't necessarily the best thought, and maybe we could produce a better thought. The whole approach to the New Zealand Rugby Union, and this was in preparation for the successful 2011 World Cup, I think it was. So this is in the few years before that I was involved with all of this. What they wanted to know was, rather than guessing, rather than saying, oh, we think we know what the physiological demands of elite rugby playing is, they employed me to find out. Here's how I did it. I sat through X number of entire test matches played by the All Blacks against 4 or 5 other test playing nations during one given season. And with video footage from a video that was mounted on the top of the grandstand, which just panned along with the play, and that was all it was, every one of the 15 players on the All Blacks team, individually, I tracked every single thing done, every single movement made by that player from the time the whistle went for the kickoff until the whistle went for full time. Minute by minute, second by second, what is that player doing? Standing still, walking, jogging, running, sprinting, tackling, being tackled, distances covered, the whole works, so that we could get a really, really accurate physiological picture of the demands of elite rugby union playing. We also backed that up with strapping heart rate monitors on each player to see what their heart rate responses were during a game, to sort of back up the physical view of what the guy was actually doing. And that's how we built a picture of what rugby players need to be able to physiologically withstand for the 80 minutes competitively of a rugby game. And as such, we then designed training programs to train those All Blacks to be optimally fit for that purpose. Whereas previously, it was thought they needed to be hugely aerobically fit. And as such, they were telling these guys to run miles and miles and miles of steady state jogging for, preparation for the rigors of high intensity work and all that kind of stuff. Well, that's just nonsense. That's ridiculous. In the same way that a runner should never, ever run longer than their competitive distance at a speed that is slower than what they want to run at, the same is true of a rugby player. Why would you send a rugby player to run even 10 Ks in 45 minutes or 60 minutes even for most of them, when that's not what they're doing during a game of rugby? What they're actually doing on average is covering something like 6.7 kilometers in 80 minutes. And the vast majority of that is, if you crunch all the actual activity of rugby together, it's like 5 minutes in each half, 10 minutes for the whole game out of 80, that rugby players are doing anything more than standing absolutely still or walking.
That's a good point.
No. So that's what we did. And we put that all together and we put that to the rugby union and said, this is how you need to train the All Blacks, not the way you're doing it. And as you know, that was a successful campaign to win the World Cup. Now, fitness isn't the only thing that determines who's going to win the World Cup, obviously, but it's up there, because all else being equal, if you're fitter than everybody else, then that gives you the advantage. So, yep, there we go. That's what we did with the All Blacks. That's one example of populations that we've worked with, and that I've said what you need to do is train specifically. I'll give you another example. The Australian and New Zealand Defence Forces, independently at separate times, I've been involved in doing research for those guys, because what they have found is that they are breaking a huge proportion of soldiers in training them. Because there's a thing called the BFT, which is a test that what they do, among other things, the end of the BFT, is they get a bloke to put a pack on his back, and the pack contains a set list of equipment, same for everybody, pretty much. It has a set weight. It's all put down in the doctrine, in the books, that this is what it is, this is what a soldier must carry. This is the kit, blah, blah. The total weight of which in the kit bag was, from memory, 75 point something kilos. Additional to that 75 kilos, they are required to carry a weapon, which is another 7.5 kilos, and X number of rounds of ammunition, another 7.5 kilos, plus X volume of water, several more kilos. And they strap that on, they pick that up, and they start walking at a given rate, and they have to make a certain distance in a certain time with that kit.
Yeah.
That's where they're breaking.
Mm. Yeah,
a large number of them are breaking at that point. And the reason they are breaking is because in order to prove yourself fit to attempt the BFT, what you have to do is pass the general fitness test, which is aerobically based.
Mm.
Carrying a huge amount of weight, a large distance at a pedestrian rate of marching is not an aerobically based event. It's a strength endurance based event. The best correlate actually to success in that BFT is absolute size of the bloke. The bigger, taller, stronger that bloke is, the more likely he was to succeed in that BFT. The smaller and lighter a bloke was, the more likely it was that that bloke was going to break, irrespective of how they did on an aerobic test. In fact, the blokes that were smaller and lighter did better on the aerobic test than the bigger blokes, and the bigger blokes were the ones that were not breaking in the BFT. So we went to them and we said, you're doing this wrong. This is not a good idea. You need to, do other things. Here's what you should do instead. And they said, thank you very much, and paid us the money and continued to do exactly the same thing anyway. So that's another example of elite organizations and stuff I've done. Again, my thing has always been specificity. What are you asking these people to do in the sport or in the occupation, as the case may be, that they have to be fit to do? The best way to prepare them to be fit to do a certain thing is to have them do that thing. I often get questions from people like mixed martial artists who say, how should I train for MMA? And I say, do you know what I'm going to say here? Obviously, you spar is the best form of training for MMA. Technical skills and things aside, that's a separate part of your training. The actual physical fitness, spar. You do X number of rounds at high intensity with the exact same break in between that you will competitively. You mimic the event. That's the best way to. Oh, shouldn't I go and run miles? No. Do you run miles in an MMA match? Maybe you do if the bloke's 10 times your size. Otherwise, no, that's not what you're doing. So why the hell would you train that way? So I've got one professional MMA fighter as a client at the moment, for example. In the past, I have worked with New Zealand squash a little bit. I've worked with the NRL referees, the rugby league referees in Australia, in terms of their preparation. Because again, to be even considered for appointment as a referee in high-level rugby league matches, you have to meet their fitness test, and their fitness test is a test largely of aerobic fitness. Once again, how far does a rugby league referee move during a game of rugby league? Well, it's about 6.7 kilometres in 80 minutes. So as long as they could do that, they should be fit enough to referee, shouldn't they?
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah,
I've
so
seen
that's where
myself.
I'm coming from. Specificity, and more specificity.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. I've seen that in the gym sort of thing. You'll see the same people come in, do the cardio workouts and think, when we're not looking like, the muscular tone people that are, opposite lifting heavy weights on the power rack, doing squats and all these ballistic, power movements, you think that's why, because you're doing something which isn't specific to what you are trying to achieve.
Exactly. And actually aerobic work, if anything, will strip muscle mass off you, which will make you less buff, more likely to gain weight. And while you're at it, it makes you feel hungry. So you're going to overeat as well. The whole idea is ridiculous. So don't do aerobic stuff, frankly.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So how would the specificity in training, how would that apply for someone that's maybe someone in the general population, like a mum that's just trying to get a bit more toned and fitting up, right, versus the elite athletes? Is there a difference?
Yeah. So someone from the general public comes to me and says, what do I do to put on a bit of muscle mass? Well, you do heavy hypertrophy training, because that's how to train for muscle mass. If someone says to me, look, I just want to be a bit toned and a bit strong and a bit more muscular, I say, well, which? Because the training methodologies for those three things are different. They're all specific. If you want strength, you train for strength. And the way to train for strength is with very, very heavy weights and almost no reps, like 2 or 3 reps in a set. Plus, that's a time under tension issue for absolute strength rather than anything else so much. If you want to tone, then you're doing high repetitions of relatively low weights. And if you want to build muscle mass, then you're doing 2 sets of 8. So I want to be a bit stronger and a bit more toned and a bit more muscular. Well, which? Because all those training methodologies are different, and a lot of them are antagonistic to one another. So you're going to have to tell me specifically, Mr. Joe Public, what your outcome goal is so that I can give you a specific training program for that goal.
Yeah. Would you say there's much impact on almost cycling your training? So for example, you do the 2 sets of 8 sort of protocol, then you might do something more endurance based or, aerobic based. So what would you say was the best there. But what would you do?
Sorry, for cyclists, was that the?
Just for anyone really. So the person you mentioned that wants to tone up, get strong, but build
Right.
muscle. So would they cycle
Well,
their
I would
treatment?
suggest to that person that they need to pick one of those.
Mm,
You
right.
can't train for all three of those things because they are
Yeah.
different outcomes that have different training, and the training is antagonistic.
Mm,
So
right.
someone that insists that they want to be toned, muscular, and strong, I say, well, perhaps you need to clone yourself a couple of times because this, you're not special. You too are subject to the laws of physics and physiology, and so pick one. Which one do you want me to train you for?
Brilliant. Yeah.
And then someone will come to me that's like a multi-sport athlete, and I'll say, oh, for God's sake, stop doing multi-sport. Is what I usually say.
Yeah, I come
God.
across a lot of people trying to do
Yeah,
CrossFit with powerlifting, with bodybuilding, with
yeah,
long
yeah.
distance
Well, that's
running.
just
It's
dumb.
a bit
I'm
much.
sorry, there's no other way to describe it. That's dumb.
Mm.
You won't achieve it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next bit I wanted to touch on was mainly like the dietary aspect of physique building. So
Mm.
how would you alter your macronutrient composition? If at all, would you leverage protein, leverage fat? How
Mm.
is that specific to an each individual?
All right. There is pretty much not that much variation between individuals in terms of what's ideal macronutrient wise and nutrition wise. Pretty much irrespective of athlete, non-athlete, sedentary, it doesn't really matter. The thing that changes most from person to person is the absolute amount of food that is consumed by that person. That's determined by their age and stage. The season has quite a play on that. Their body size, their lean body mass, for example. For example, a bloke like you, Jonathan, is going to need a lot more food than a bloke like me, for example, because I'm 5'6" and 65 kilos. And you're not either of those things, are you? So
Either of those, no, but
no, you're neither of those things. So, the amount of food that would be great for me will not do for you. However, its makeup, macronutrient wise, is about the same. The only really difference is not because of your size or whatever else, or training status or exercise. It's just a genetic, very slight N=1 difference in what's ideal for you within a sort of around about 5% range. I usually start everybody, if I'm giving someone nutritional counseling, I start everybody on 66-33, which is the ideal or the goal of the nutrition program is to get 66% of what they call calories, energy, from fat and 33% from protein. And guess how many carbohydrates? That's right, boys and girls, if you can do the math, none. Zero, zip. Even if you are a heavy lifter, even if you are a bodybuilder, no, you don't need carbs. Even if you are an athlete, still none. No, none at all, zero. So 66% fat and 33% protein. By mass is about 50-50 because of the difference in energy content and calories between fats and carbohydrates, give or take. So that's where I aim for to start. And then we play around with it a bit to dial in someone's ideal ratio over a few months of nutritional counseling.
So would you say the
oh,
fat content would vary in terms of calories between 60 and 70% for most, if not all people?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And there are also quite a few people running around at the moment promoting an 80-20 approach. I think that's too high.
I've got my own thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, there might be an indication in the odd person here and there. For example, my lovely partner Pim is currently attempting 80-20. All right, fine. It's her funeral. It's her, decision to try what if she thinks it's going to work for her. She might be right. I'm not saying she's wrong in any way. I wouldn't dare. Yeah.
I think what that sort of group is trying to do is lower the amount of gluconeogenesis we're getting from the protein and elevate the fat.
Yeah.
Do you think that might have some merit in some way? So in
In
the short
someone
term,
that's
maybe at
got,
least.
yeah, in someone that's got an overly active gluconeogenic pathway that's too easily activated and they're producing too much sugar, one way to get that back on track is to cut the protein back relatively quite a bit. For, I would say, for a transcribed period of time. I wouldn't suggest someone should have their protein intake as low as 20% all the time. I think that's too low.
Yeah, I agree.
Personally. So I still think somewhere between really 30 and 35% protein is ideal for most people, and the balance is fat, pretty much. Now, if you do that, I say no carbohydrates at all, but obviously meat contains some carbohydrate, but it'll say 0 on the label, mostly because it's less than 1 gram per 100. It doesn't mean that's absolutely 0, but to all intents and purposes. So, yeah, that's where you should be aiming. Meat and fat.
That's brilliant. Yeah. So
No plants.
not one ever, never.
No plants. None. No fiber. Not required. In fact, contraindicated. That's for another day. That's not what you call.
Yeah. So the other thing is, I wanted to ask, would you say there was like a minimum protein intake you'd have to have? So there's a lot of numbers flying around the internet, this meta-analysis says this and this.
Yep.
Obviously it varies between, for an athlete or a sedentary person, but what do you think that is?
I think for the average person, give or take, that baseline, I'm aiming to start, in terms of absolute amount, I'm aiming to start at 1.75 grams of protein per kilogram of lean body mass, or per kilogram of ideal body mass, if you like to think of it that way. So to work out your ideal body mass, you can go to your favorite search engine and type in height, weight ideals or height, weight normative values, and it will give you what it is. So for example, if you're 5'9", it will tell you that that's 73 kilos for a man, give or take. So what you would do is you would take that 73, 74 kilos, whatever it is, and you'd multiply that by 1.75, which would give you, here's my calculator, we can do it right now as a
130 or something.
Something like that anyway. Yeah, sure. And then what you have to do is you have to multiply that figure by 4 to give you a weight of meat. That would provide that much protein. Why do you need to do that? Well, because meat is mostly water by weight. So once we've done that, you will get about 515 grams of steak, for example, or whatever kind of meat it is. That's your daily protein if you are an average man of 5'9" with an average build sort of thing. Now, obviously, you'll dial in N equals 1 for yourself. There'll be slight differences around that, but that's a starting point. Now, obviously, Jono, that's not going to be enough meat for you by a long shot, because your lean mass is vastly more than 73 kilos, I would expect.
Yeah.
So you would need to base it on what your lean mass is. Because you are heavily muscled, because you are a bodybuilder, you take what your lean mass actually is. So if we can assume that you're nominally around 10% body fat in between competitions, for example, then you would take your weight, whatever it is, and you'd use 90% of that as your lean mass, and then you'd take the 1.75 off that, then multiply that by 4, and you'd probably end up with, well, how much steak do you eat a day? How much meat do you eat?
I'd probably say about 700 grams to a kilo.
Right.
Depends. Sometimes I have more eggs, sort of thing. Depends what got in the fridge.
Yeah, protein intake. Yeah. Okay. So that's a significant amount of meat, as you would expect. Yeah. I'm more like half a kilo.
That's you done for the day, is that right?
That's my protein for the day. I have that in one hit, and I have the fat that's attendant with that meat, and I add additional butter. I sometimes add cheese as well, I'll often also add this kind of Greek yogurt tzatziki style thing as well, which is basically just Greek yogurt with a few bits of garlic in it for a bit of flavor.
Yeah.
I know, no plants either. I have to hand in my card because I've just admitted to having some plant material. Okay, I also drink coffee as well. Sue me, if you like.
Mine as well. My nice big cup.
Oh, there you go. Look at that. Piggy wiggy. Yes. So that's the program. About 1.75 and then dial it in from there. The best gauge, I'll tell you what the best gauge is on intakes. You've evolved as a human and similar species that are before humans that weren't quite human but led directly to humans. It's been about 4.5 million years that we've had a very similar approach to nutrition and lifestyle and stuff. And in that time, your brain has developed this really incredible thing. It's called hunger. When your body needs nutrient, it tells you you're hungry. And when your body has the nutrient on board that it was asking for in the first place, it sends you another signal that you now don't need to eat anymore. Here's what I suggest you do. Provided that when I say food, that means fat and protein from animals. It does not mean plants, plant material, or anything derived from plants or carbohydrates of any kind. Food, fat and protein. When your body craves food, feed your body food until you get that impulse that goes, you know what? Reckon I'm done. That was grand. Listen to that impulse as well. Even if there are 2 bites of meat left on your plate at that point and you've got that message, stop eating now, put that meat in the fridge. It'll still be there later. You can still eat it later when you are hungry again. Never, unless you are priming, which is a thing we'll talk about another day, never force food into your body. Don't ignore your body when it says I want food, but also don't ignore it when it says I don't. The same is true of drinking fluids. People say, how much water should I drink? Well, you have this thing, it's called thirst. When you get that, drink some fluid. And when you've drunk enough fluid, your body tells you to stop doing it, doesn't it? Go, well, I'm done now. I'm not thirsty anymore.
Yeah, that's the thing I keep saying to people, like with the hunger signals.
People in the gym, and like they'll do a set and then they'll go, oh, I better have a drink. They'll do another
routine
set.
rather than a signal. Yeah.
Not to mention sitting on the bench for 5 minutes in between sets. Texting
and chatting up with your girlfriends and things.
Yeah, or looking around to see who's looking hot in Lycra or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I see quite a bit of that sometimes. It's quite funny.
So that's it on food and fluid intake, I think. Again, people say, how much electrolyte should I take in? Your brain also has a thing for that. If you have a craving for salt, have some salt.
What do you
Otherwise,
say?
Add salt to your food to taste, which is what I do.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah, I'm quite glad you've mentioned those things. I've actually got videos coming up. They might already be up by the time I actually upload this on exactly those topics.
All right.
I appreciate you sort of adding to that.
Cool.
Do you have any closing comments before I wrap this up?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered off what you wanted to today, which was basically to get at what is the overriding underpinning philosophy of physical preparation for anything, and it is specificity. Perhaps we'll have another discussion another time, either on my channel or yours, or both. I don't care. Where we talk about the actual physiological reasons why that is optimal. It seems intuitively right anyway, but some people still want, well, what's the underpinning physiology? Why is the idea that we need to do this huge aerobic base before we do any intensity work? Why is that wrong? I'm quite happy to explain why that is definitely wrong and false and a bad idea. We can do that another day. But in closing, I'd like to thank you for having me on your fine, fine channel. It's been an absolute pleasure. You are a gentleman and a scholar. And I would suggest that all people who follow me should definitely subscribe also to Jono, because it's all about cross-pollination. It's all about supporting each other here in the nominally carnivorous community, people that get it with nutrition and exercise. And yep, so do sub to all of Jono's channels and social media things and stuff. I believe you're also available for consultancy.
That's right. Yeah. So I have a website which you can book through. I offer training plans, things like that. I do.
Awesome.
I think like yourself prefer consultations because the value it can add to someone in
Yeah.
giving them information so they can make their own decisions based on
Yeah.
the tools I give them.
Yeah.
The website is compositionconsultant.com. You
Awesome.
can get a hold of me for quick questions, in the YouTube comment section. And please, like Bart said, follow his channel if you're one of my 80 subscribers that aren't following him already. So,
all right.
cheers.
Let's make sure you do. Otherwise, you'll get a late night visit from this guy. He'll bring his truncheon. All right.
Thanks so much. Cheers.